This is Ambazonia Calling. News, analysis, commentary, opinion, editorials. Ambazonia Calling is a co-production of Africa Freedom Network, the Missions Tribune, and Compass Free Press. Welcome. My name is Ntumfoyn Herbert, and I bring revolutionary greetings from our studios in Washington, D.C. to all of you, friends of Ambazonia and fellow Ambazonians on Ground Zero and across the globe.
Ambazonians across the board are greeting the news of an upcoming informal Security Council meeting May 13th at the UN in New York with mixed feelings. I am innocent here.
Might the Biya regime be holding Dr. Fontan's family hostage and exacting a pound of flesh from Ambazonia through him? This is Tanya Jude Agua Ozugen.
Some fool has called for the institution of a state of exception in Ambazonia. If you want to know who that Nyamfuka is, stay tuned. This is Veronique Vetimfe.
The tussle for power while the campaign for recognition is on life support is pure madness. This is Manjong Jude Ambe.
The cabals who are relying on our president Siku for power grab and positioning will have nothing to hang on anymore. God at work indeed for the revolution.
We laid the foundation for an imperial presidency with unlimited powers. This is C. Ajimbo Ambe.
This is my office. Helicopter, I'm waiting for you here. Amoka, I'm waiting for you here. I'm ready for the battle.
It means that all decisions will be coming from jail. And now the Yakaba meeting and say you have to say so, you say so. They can start ruling us from jail.
On the 13th of May, we have to all converge onto New York. This is a unique opportunity.
Welcome this 5th day of May in the year of our Lord 2019. This is edition 48 of Ambazonia Calling. Today's edition is fully loaded with all of the stories you are dying to hear. So stay tuned. Here is Lambert Bomb opening up with our editorial for the week.
The argument has been made times without number that the future of Africa is too important for the emergence of leaders to be left to chance. It is a point that the 38-year-old Ambazonian whiz Acha Leke made in a recently published interview to Africa State of the Mind. Leadership, or lack thereof, is at the origin of Africa's worst problems, Leke said. Strike out Africa and replace it with Ambazonia. It is so clear that what Acha Leke said of Africa is valid for the Ambazonian revolution. This week, jailed leader who was once voted into office as the leader of the Skakuf Governing Council before he metamorphosed into the self-proclaimed president of Ambazonia, Seseko Ayuktabe, threw a monkey wrench into the interim government group. From confinement at the Kondengi Maximum Prison, Seseko Ayuktabe effectively threw a grenade into the interim leadership of his successor, Comrade Sako Ekome, by announcing that he, Seseko Ayuktabe, was firing Comrade Sako by reinstating the government that had been enthroned after the controversial Zaria conclave, months before Seseko and his closest aides were abducted, illegally renditioned to Cameroon, and incarcerated by the colonial regime in Yaoundé. The order issued from jail this week, if implemented, would have effectively set up an imperial presidency. It is very telling of the kind of manipulation that must have taken place to convince Seseko Ayuktabe to sign such an order when one considers that Comrade Sako had just submitted a new cabinet for vetting to the Restoration Council. Those dissatisfied with being kicked out started off what has to be qualified as an insider coup, a palace coup of sorts, albeit led from jail. This sad turn of events was unavoidable and will remain unavoidable going forward, unless of course, the issues of leadership can be treated more seriously by Ambazonians. What Seseko Ayuk-Tabe did this week is a byproduct of a revolution in which the most educated Ambazonians have professed belief for a strong man and total lack of faith in strong institutions. It is the inevitable byproduct when the people kiss up to leaders instead of holding them to account. Ambazonians are paying the price for the sin of complacency that is the single biggest evil devouring the heart and soul of this revolution. The erection of an interim government without institutions, without a single vote from the people, without checks and balances, and without mechanisms for holding the feet of those in power to the fire is a kind of outcome Ambazonians are bound to deal with repeatedly. I know for a fact that there is a mob online that is going bananas right now just listening to this editorial. People who are fuming that we dare to address this issue at all. Members of that political lynch mob have used the loudest of vuvuzelas to outperform any other views online, screaming against anyone who dares to question what they call the people's government. Their all truth is simply this: Ambazonians have become their worst enemies. This week, thank God, the order from prison did not instruct Ambazonians to surrender any quest for independence. We can consider that our revolution dodged the bullet on that one. For how long can we hope to avoid such danger? It is only a matter of time before an order so contrary to where Ambazonians are going will be issued by leaders with a gun held to their heads. If you were truly outraged that a leader from jail tried to continue to rule from behind bars, as some dictators would like to continue to rule even from their graves, you must ask yourself one tough question. What has been my role in setting up, fostering, funding, and propping up an interim government that is not accountable to the people in any substantive way? Merely claiming among ourselves that this is the people's government will not earn it the same credentials before those who are all lobbying to recognize Ambazonia. Let us all get to work and prevent our revolution from being as laughable as it is ridiculous on this issue of an interim government. This is Lambert Mbom for Ambazonia Calling.
What Cameroon has done to us, I want you never to forget. The pain they have brought to bear on this generation, I want you never to forget. Not out of hate, but so that the next generation will remember and make sure they do the things they are supposed to do, never to go through this again.
I will continue to play my part to ask the people of Southern Cameroon to take their revolution into their hands and continue the fight to liberate themselves.
I'm sorry to say, because of France's policies in Africa, in French Africa, the state of La République du Cameroon do not have any pressure on them to find a way to resolve this issue, because they are always thinking that no matter what happens, France will always be there to give them coverage.
Still ahead in this edition, we have The Devil Unmasked with Professor Emmanuel Tatamenta. We have a winner of the Nyamfuka of the Week. And we are not done until you have heard our letter to Joshua. So stay tuned, kick back, relax, and enjoy Ambazonia Calling.
It is time to catch up on any of the news that you missed in the course of the week. Here is Innocent here with the first part of our news wrap-up.
A stalemate has ensued within the interim government group ever since its imprisoned president, Seseko Ayuk-Tabe, fired the acting president, Dr. Samuel Sako, accused and found guilty in the court of public opinion of embezzling and overseeing the embezzlement of over $1.5 million of My Trip to BOYO funds, a fundraising scheme purportedly launched with great aplomb to support a multi-pronged campaign to quicken the actualization of the independence of Southern Cameroon's Ambazonia. Outrage and disbelief from the pro-FAKO camp, which has questioned the mental capacity of Sisiko Ayuk-Tabe to make decisions under duress, as well as argued that their former strongman may have been unwittingly compromised at best, have only raised once more issues of legitimacy that have undermined claims and counterclaims. In the meantime, Dr. Fontan was literally spat out by the assembly of organizations that make up the Southern Cameroon's Liberation Council after he followed up on the footsteps of Sisiko Ayuk-Tabe to suspend Dr. Samuel Sako from the SCLC. On the same day, May 2nd, the movement for the restoration of the independence of Southern Cameroons led the way in distancing itself from the unilateral decision of Dr. Fontan. John Ba Akuro, spokesman for the SCLC, echoed that Dr. Fontan had more than overstepped his bounds, even as convener of the conference that birthed the Southern Cameroon's Liberation Council. There are unconfirmed reports that the United Nations Security Council has scheduled an informal meeting May 13th at the upcoming session in New York to discuss the worsening crisis in the Cameroons.
So the breaking news of the day is that finally the United Nations Security Council will hold an important session on the 13th of May to discuss the Southern Cameroons question. The first time ever that the United Nations Security Council will be holding such a session to debate the crisis, to debate the conflict, the ongoing genocide in the Southern Cameroons. And this is at the behest of the United States of America.
Mixed feelings characterize Ambazonians across the board.
To talk about it in an informal meeting. They clearly use the word informal meeting, not a formal meeting, something informal, just like pass.
Some saluting the idea and others castigating it as a predictable outcome where France will exercise veto power to maintain Ambazonia in bondage.
We should not rely or jubilate on this big news coming from the UN Security Council. Yes, it is a plus to our struggle. It is a plus for humanity. It's a plus for those who advocate to fight against genocide, colonialism, and crimes against humanity. But at this stage, I, as the spokesperson of the Ambazonia Defense Forces, I want to encourage every Ambazonian to keep fighting. We have to keep buying the guns. It is through the guns and the bullets that will make us stamp out our authority as people who want real-time independence.
For these, the General Assembly is ideal because an up or down vote would settle the matter without French influence. The May 13th meeting is purportedly at the request of the United States of America that has been canvassing European and African countries to move resolutely towards a definite solution to the crisis in the Cameroons. In the meantime, President Paul Biya of La République du Cameroon has awarded a medal to the visiting United Nations Commissioner for Human Rights, Veronica Michelle Bachelet. The award, observers note, is a step down from prized golden statues that he has doled out to many key international players, including UN boss Antonio Guterres, the British Foreign Minister of State for Africa at the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, Harriet Baldwin, who both remain ardent supporters of Cameroon's scorched earth policy to suppress Ambazonian nationalism. The visit of the rights chief is to secure access for observers to independently visit Ambazonia, where rights abuses have been reported by many reputable non-partisan and non-governmental organizations, but remain unverified even as the government has consistently denied actions of its military caught on camera. Her visit comes barely 2 weeks after the Human Rights Watch organization was refused entry into Cameroon. The International Crisis Group, ICG, has declared that Cameroon's Anglophone crisis is deadlocked. Among other things, the 44-page report released Thursday, May 2nd, reveals that as many as 1,850 people have been killed in the 20 months of clashes. Over 530,000 have been displaced internally and led tens of thousands to seek refuge abroad, mostly in Nigeria. Most notably, however, the report shows its biased hand for Cameroon when it recommends a solution to the crisis, a decentralization to grant greater autonomy to communes and regions. Journal du Cameroun, an outline publication, is reporting that bishops in Cameroon have condemned the handling of the crisis in southern Cameroon, known in La République du Cameroun as the Northwest and Southwest regions, laying blame for the mishandling on President Paul Biya. In his opening remarks at the 44th plenary session of the Cameroon Episcopal National Conference, its outgoing president, Monseigneur Samuel Kleda, slammed President Biya for never ever responding to an offer of mediation by the bishops and literally shutting the doors of Etudi to any help. Said he, quote, "On several occasions we have offered our services to both parties for dialogue to take place. We formed a team of bishops to that effect, but we were never listened to. All attempts for dialogue were simply rejected." End quote. You are listening to Ambazonia Calling, your space for educated news analysis, informed opinions and commentary towards the recognition of a free, independent Ambazonia. I am Innocentia. Stay with us.
Since the days of John the Baptist, the kingdom of God suffered violence. Only the violent one takes it by force. You're underground king. Boom. You the cry, about what the cry. Don't tire, about what why.
Mama the cry, boy the cry, about what the cry, we the cry. Free me, Mama the cry, boy the cry, we the cry. Wanna free me, Mama the cry, boy the cry, we the cry. Wanna free me.
Sick and tired of this, la Republic wanna free we. Amango today inside pay, no the free. We president on the side say all man of yay. Grand ambition, fuck that slogan, no yay. Presido, the pay jaga jaga. Una take all in the weavers scatter. They need 102 students for senators. Una select 2 Anglophones, eskenagers. Bia, young, vision, treason. Eske we know why man show BBC they for prison. They don't some all we then start for colors Anglophones. Fuck up the government, we ain't tools. Minister for communication, no fit talk good English. Southern Cameroon independence, that's my wish. No good third roads, no seaports, no light, no water, no airports. President, you overget fake promises. Wait to happen, failing us, you bring us diseases. But men are the cry, we are the ask why. You don't come for that chair, you don't go shake, you go die.
Men are the cry, we are the cry, about what they cry, we the cry. Wanna free me, Mama the cry, boy the cry, we the cry. Wanna free me.
Innocent is staying on with me in studio. He's got the second part of our news wrap-up for the week.
Chiefs of the Southwest Conference in Ambazonia's southern zone are asking Colonial Governor Okala Bilai to watch his tongue and his manners. In a correspondence signed by Chief Martin Mafaninjie on behalf of the chiefs of the conference, the colonial officer was reminded of customs and traditions by which the chiefs do not march past, not even to lead their subjects, and much less so as an injunction by a civil administrator. The colonial governor had promised a little over a week ago that if the chiefs did not file past in line like primary school kids to march past on May 20th, their stipends would be cut off and they would lose their chieftaincies. Meantime, confidential sources have shared with Ambazonia Calling that invitations by European Union to foster dialogue with Ambazonian pro-independence groups is currently stalled by factionalism and grandstanding. Group identity, as source revealed on condition of anonymity, seems to be trumping nationalism. Sources are warning that fighters on ground zero, particularly in Fontan, BOYO state, be careful and stop collecting food from people and sources that are not trusted. We cannot independently verify claims at this point that some of the food has been poisoned, but it is worth taking precautions. We end this wrap-up with two stories, similar in nature, for us to listen carefully to the cries of those who are making ultimate sacrifices on the ground, beginning with General Nambere, who has largely gone silent over the last several months and resurfaced with an audio message.
I tell the way, tell the Republic, tell our Ambazonia government, we'll be ready for bring change for our land. I don't come for change situation for Batibo. This is my office. Helicopter, I'm waiting for you here. Amoka, I'm waiting for you here. I'm ready for the battle.
Whereas his commitment to the fight for the independence of Southern Cameroon remains reportedly unwavering, he swears to reveal certain truths if the diaspora does not sit up and do what is right for the revolution.
I'm telling you, the Ambazonian government, I'm not a politician. Don't take advantage of me to do politics. We the kida suma sumale. Chai. We the kida suma sumale.
In the second story and final one, it unfolded on Labor Day, May 1st in Mamfe, where Yannick Power, purportedly a dreaded Amber fighter, confessed to terrorizing the local population in MANYU state out of ignorance. Now he vows to work with the population to root out Amber boys from MANYU. Innocentia, Ambazonia Calling.
Welcome to our special interview segment, The Devil Unmasked, The Truth Out. We will return to more news stories after The Devil Unmasked, and today's Devil Unmasked is a special dedication. It is not an interview. At least it is not an interview done by Ambazonia Calling. Barrister John Fruso, the counsel for Siseko Ayuktabe, was on a TV station this week, and he said something, defended our cause in a phenomenal way. I want everyone on Ambazonia Calling to hear this. Here's Barrister John Fruso.
Maître Fou, the president says that we have only one fatherland. That is true.
Well, before I answer that question, let me make a comment about what I've just been hearing for the last 10 minutes.
Go on.
I'll start with Professor Nyamji. You have cited all the international conventions that Cameroon has signed. What you forgot is that Cameroon has violated almost all of them. You violated the important Convention on Refugees by going to a sovereign country, carrying refugees and asylum seekers and bringing them to this country to try them so that you can sentence them to death. It's a case of Ayuktabe and 9 others. You violated international convention by shooting and killing women and children and old men in the north, in the southern Cameroons. What do you call that? And you talk about independentists. I want to also tell you that we are the southern Cameroon is not independentist. You had your independence in 1960, Professor. We had ours in 1961. The only difference is that we had to join you. And joining you, we have come to realize that you are people of bad faith. You have destroyed not only yourself, but us. and we're leaving you and leaving you for good. We had our independence in 1961, you had yours in 1960. We are barely restoring that independence that we had, Mr. Professor. We are not independentists in your country. That's the first point. Second point, you should know as a professor that when you violate international conventions, you at the same time violate your national laws, because all the international conventions are superior to your national laws. I'm a lawyer, I'm talking, and you know what I'm talking about. The particular case of the Convention on Refugees, promulgated in 1951 and ratified by Cameroon in 1961, you violated it on the 27th or 26th of January 2018 by going to Nigeria and carrying asylum seekers and also refugees and bringing them here with the complicity of Nigeria to come and try them and sentence them to death. You have turned the military tribunal, which was meant for military men, into your political tribunals. Because everybody now, including people who were just marching on the street, like Professor Kamto and others, you send them to the military tribunal. You send all our people from southern Cameroon that you think that they have done something wrong to you, you send them to military tribunal. We have more than 2,500 southern Cameroonians in detention, Professor. And because you violated the African Charter of Human Rights, which says that no civilian, I repeat, no civilian should be tried in the military court. And you are trying all civilians now in the military court. What do you call that? To whom are you teaching these lessons? And I'll go to Madame Com as a diplomat. As a diplomat, you should know, Madame, that when you violate human rights with impunity, you create humanitarian disaster with impunity in any part of the world, your sovereignty is out of the window, Madame. Because the world is a global village. You as a diplomat, I don't know which year you were trained as a diplomat, because you have been you are looking like the same age with me. It means that you have done your diplomacy a long time ago. So you should know that the present diplomacy, humanitarian law, preys on your sovereignty. Look at what you have done to the Northwest and Southwest. You've destroyed all the villages. You have killed more than 10,000 people. You have killed women, children, and old people. You have burnt villages. 215 villages have been burnt, Madam. And you come and sit here. But when you started here, I made a statement. And let me repeat myself. One person, your president, and one party, the CPDM, you have destroyed this beautiful country, which we, from the Southern Cameroons, came in with good faith so that we build a beautiful country. And we have, and you have been taking our resources for 57 years, and you could not build that country that will join you. What did you do? You decided to cancel the federation that we agreed before we came in, and now you are killing us because you want to destroy. All the population of the southern Cameroon so that you can take the petroleum. I want to inform you that we will fight to the last man standing, and I will see how you will get there. And to answer the question, yes. Listen, Mr. Beer is like somebody who is drowning. He is drowning. And when somebody is drowning, you throw a rope for him to catch and see how he can come out. I don't know whether he is giving now his will to you Cameroonians, because I'm not. It doesn't concern me. I'm a Southern Cameroonian Ambazonia. He is talking to you Cameroonians, and since I'm a political observer, I would like to comment on that. This man is giving his last testimony. 37 years and 86 years old. 37 years in power. even Professor Nyamdi will agree with me that it's time for him to go. Everybody has told him to go, and he now sees that the pressure on him has become so much that he has to be writing his will to the Cameroonian people. Where was he 37 years ago? Where was he? He now takes less than 5 days and comes out with about 20 tweets begging. He's begging who? Maybe he's begging you people. We are finished with you. Because we came here in good faith. We made sure that the resources that we had, you took them. You made yourself, you made all the money you want to. You took everything. You took CDC, took palm oil, took the crude oil, took everything, and we didn't complain for 57 years, madam. And today, you can sit and say that Cameroon can solve its problems. For 3 years, have you been able to solve the problem of the civil war in southern Cameroon? Have you? You declared that war against us, and we are defending it, and we'll defend to the last man standing. Look, Mr. Bear has come to the end of the road. That's why he's making those tweets. He's come to the end of the road. Cameroonians like to pretend. I don't know whether we'll have a population or we'll have people. Because in other countries, I like to quote Alpha Condé, the president of Guinea-Conakry, who said that he doesn't understand Cameroon anymore. The Cameroon army, which is supposed to be a Republican army, has been reduced to the militia of Mr. Biya. Mr. Biya does anything with the army. He sends the army to go and destroy a part of the country. He takes the military tribunal and transforms it into the military court, into a political court, so that civilians are being tried dead in violation, Mr. Nyamdi, Professor Nyamdi, in violation of international law. Where are we? Mr. Bear, I'm calling on you before you step out, before you go. That is, if you want to, withdraw the troops from the northwest and southwest. Release everybody whom you have put in prison, and that is including our president Ayuk Tabe and 9 others, and all the other English-speaking people, including Professor Kamto, who won the election of 2018. And you stole it. Instead of sitting quiet, you didn't only steal it, you catch him now and put in prison, and you want to try him in the military tribunal. Release everybody. Come to the negotiating table. If you cannot come to the negotiating table, maybe the next president will come to the negotiating table. But for now, if you want to go in peace, withdraw the troops, release everybody, and then you can go and then the next president will negotiate with us. And we are negotiating all the terms of separation. You should understand that. The matter has ended, Mr. Beer. I'm sending this message to you. The matter has ended. Thank you very much.
This is Ambazonia. One nation, one soul, one people. Sacrificing, bleeding, and yes, dying if need be, until we kick the colonialists out and enthrone a government of the people in Boya.
There is indeed only one Barrister John Fruso, absolutely brilliant in that interview. Continuing with our news stories right now, ghost towns have been announced for Ground Zero, the whole on the 19th and 20th of May. The goal is to frustrate any attempt by the beer colonialists to organize any event on our homeland. At the same time, Ambazonians living in the diaspora have been invited to stage protest marches in the capitals or in any city in the country of residence where they are based, to bring attention to the fact that there is no one and indivisible Cameroon, and that we are too imperfectly divided already. Here's John Baakuru with another announcement from the SCLC. This one concerns protests planned for New York City on the 13th of May 2019, the day when the Security Council opens the discussions on the matters concerning the Cameroons.
It has been unanimously agreed that given the importance of this maiden discussion that the United Nations Security Council is going to be holding on the humanitarian situation in the southern Cameroons, it is important for each and every southern Cameroonian, for every single Ambazonian based in the United States of America to come out so that we show on the 13th of May to the members of the Security Council that we are a people determined to obtain our freedom. We have to all converge onto New York. This is a unique opportunity. We have waited for this opportunity for 3 good years, and now it is here. That is why at the SCLC, we all believe that it will be important for everyone to come out there and be counted. Let's organize travel parties and let us all be there. Support all those who are unable to make it there and make sure that we play the game of numbers. We have to be there in our thousands and prove to the International Crisis Group, which is erroneously trying to push across the idea that those of us who stand for the total freedom of the Southern Cameroons, for the total freedom of Ambazonia, are in the minority. Once more, let us come out and show the world that we will continue to fight until we attain our objective, which is arriving BOYO. Don't wait for anyone to mobilize you. Be the mobilizer yourself. Adita continue.
It started like a joke and I smiled. From Meme to Momo, we said no violence. Now I know not how to smile, 'cause my loved ones are gone. There is no place to call home. Our homes have been burnt. I am homeless in my homeland. There is no to call my home. Homeless, homeless, homeless in my homeland. When are we going to have a dialogue? We have buried more than enough. Nothing heals the past like time. When are we going to have a dialogue? We've been marginalized enough. You may fool some people sometime. You cannot fool them all the time. Homeless, homeless. I am homeless in my home.
With all my apologies, I'm coming down with a cold, but let's turn right away to more of our analysis and commentary on breaking stories. And one of the big ones is what happened to Ambazonia this week. Barrister Sia Jumverambe says Ambazonians cannot blame what is happening on anyone else but themselves.
It is Ambazonians themselves who gave carte blanche to Sissoco Ayuk Tabe and to his successors ever since Sissoco and some of his close aides were abducted and illegally repatriated, in fact, renditioned to the foreign neighboring La République du Cameroon. That same green light was extended to Comrade Sako Ikome. We did so by engaging in the fanatism that finds excuses and organizes cover-ups for egregious crimes. By refusing to constrain the self-proclaimed government once it was formed, Ambazonians granted permission to Sissoco Ayuk Tabe and by extension his successors to govern with unlimited powers. We laid the foundation for an imperial presidency with unlimited powers. Fans in search of a strong man bowed when Sissoco rose as the appointed one, complete with the title of His Excellency. Those who sold, defended, funded, and upheld an executive branch without limits of powers and zero checks and balances did not want a leadership that was not above the law. They wanted to hear nothing about raising the standards for ascertaining legitimacy, transparency, and accountability. It was too much to ask for in a revolution, we were told. Looking back, it would seem more and more people agree that it was being penny-wise and pound-foolish. What rose from Lagos and later from Zaria as an interim government, instead of unifying Ambazonians, forced people into camps of those who approved and those who would not touch the interim leadership with a 10-foot fork. The test of the corrupting influence of absolute power came to light long before, but was highlighted soon after the SCAPAC audit, when reaction to money being embezzled was to doubt the auditors, damn their findings, and even call for an audit of the auditors. So any funds gone missing under Comrade Sako were bound to go missing, given that no action was taken to prevent it from happening the first time it occurred. My trip to BOYO caught the disease long before it was created. Ambazonians know the disease that is afflicting them. It is one of rejecting the beer dictatorship only to embrace a dictatorship set up supposedly in their best interest. It is the refusal to acknowledge that no government is willing to grant recognition to a government that is not elected by a sovereign people. In the absence of submitting to or organizing universal elections, the minimum Ambazonians should ever have settled for is a revolutionary council or a liberation council. One that would be accorded powers of checks and balances and raised to the rank of a co-equal branch of government with powers to impeach and remove the executive branch, including full powers to remove from office for cause. This is C. Ajimbo Ambe for Ambazonia Calling.
Barrister C. Ajimbo Ambe, just one more question. Is the argument here by Ambazonians that they did not know, could not do the right thing?
It is not that Ambazonians do not know that this was the right thing to do. It is that they started off on the right foot, but when it was hijacked, they simply had no stomach for a fight over reaffirming the supreme powers of the sovereign people. It is political comedy of the worst taste to have individuals parade themselves as Ambazonian senators or parliamentarians or country, county or local government leaders when none of them has ever been elected. At one point, Comrade Sako recognized in his 2019 New Year's speech the need for elections, however limiting their use to setting up subordinate structures to the IG group. This needs to be said and repeated as many times as possible until our people finally get it. Elections will strengthen an interim leadership we want for ourselves, not weaken it. Elections will establish once and for all who really has the overwhelming backing of our people. Is it the Restoration of Independence camp, the Federalists, or the Unionists? Ambazonians set up a SCACUF governing council for a reason, along with a Restoration Council with powers to call members of the interim government to book. It is the collapse of the Restoration Council that led to the organization of the Reboot Workshop in DC, leading to the birth of ARC. The SCLC created at the recently concluded Washington, D.C. conference was further recognition that such an institution is needed. 3 fronts would be the best areas in which a Restoration Council would work in ways that deepen the collaboration and partnership so crucial for our struggle. First, the Council would be an ideal platform from which to organize unifying action, including action on self-defense on ground zero. Pockets of tiny ragtag armies is most certainly a recipe for biting the dust. Second, such a council would lead a unified diplomatic approach for recognition for Ambazonia. The third area would be leadership in mobilization and management of a joint fund, a joint common treasury committed to transparency and accountability. The division of labor, so vital for the success we look to achieve, could also be instituted at the level of the council through the setting up of a rotating leadership team. Swift, determined, timely, and urgent action is needed to get this revolution back to basics and back on the rails that lead to BOYO. Delay can only help to deliver victory to the beer regime, which has been running down the clock in an effort to continue ignoring calls for meaningful, internationally mediated negotiations. This is C. Ajimbo Ambe for Ambazonia Calling.
Oh, freedom, freedom is coming, freedom is coming, freedom is coming, oh yes, I know. Freedom is coming, freedom is coming, freedom is coming, oh yes, I know, 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 oh yes, I know,
still to come in this program.
If the sick don't mind, can he talk about the Batibo incident?
I will tell them the truth, nothing but the truth.
This week, Comrade Choi about the AGC addressed some of the questions that remain unanswered with respect to the Guzang massacre. Brother Valentine Binglo was asked to follow and provide an analysis. Here is his paper.
Comrade Cho Ayaba has to be kidding all Ambazonians. I was mesmerized watching Comrade Ayaba taking softball questions from his version of CRTV on social media.
If the sick don't mind, can he talk about the Batibo incident?
I will tell them the truth, nothing but the truth.
It is particularly disturbing not only that it has taken him so many months for Cho Ayaba to even consider addressing the Guzang massacre.
I have the audio response. I have kept it for the record.
The only thing worst is that he chose to do so by kicking more dust into our faces in the hope of blurring the facts around one of the worst crimes in this revolution to date.
There was the patrol of the Ambazonian Defense Forces that came into contact with other sister forces. I think mostly the forces that were keeping the materials of the Ambazonian Defense Forces. And they asked for their materials. Immediately, the newly appointed colonel of the Ambazonian Defense Forces was shot and he died instantly. That is when the firefighting started.
Does Comrade Cho Ayaba really want Ambazonians to believe that Guzang was, as he says, a chance encounter that turned out ugly?
It was a chance encounter between belligerent forces that turned out ugly. Those are the facts.
Really? If this is not an attempt to pull wool over the eyes of Ambazonians, someone please tell me what is.
We could have prevented that incident if we stopped from the diaspora instrumentalizing fighters. If we stop using fighters to show up our own political career, I don't need forces on the ground to be a leader.
A massacre unfolded in Guzang, not a chance encounter turned ugly, unless our friends of the AGC and ADF think the rest of the world do not understand that words have meaning. I remember very distinctly how disgusted and outraged I felt when the loud-sounding spokesperson of the ADF, Tapang Ivor Tanku, took to social media bragging about Guzang massacre and warning Ambazonians to treat it as a lesson that the ADF is ready to reach anyone else who questions their so-called supremacy as the dominant force on ground zero. Is Cho Ayaba thinking our brains are so weak that what we have heard after the massacre has been erased from our memories?
What better way to make the name than take on Ayaba? Everybody builds a career on Ayaba. Attacking me left and right, even on things that sometimes I have virtually no idea about.
Even in this effort to write history, with a pencil with frequent use of the eraser, Cho Ayaba himself repeats the explanation given by his spokesperson. He admits that it was action to collect guns
that came into contact with other sister forces. I think mostly the forces that were keeping the materials of the Ambazonian Defense Forces.
It was all about guns, the famous ruse of seized guns.
And they asked for their materials.
The most sickening part of Cho Ayaba's outing to discuss, or was it to avoid discussing the Guzang massacre, is the fact that he dared to blame the late General Ivan Ba for it.
I called General Ivan. For me, was to determine who ordered, if any order given. I called the defense, and the defense chairman never even knew.
This is the same General Ivan Ba whom the ADF replaced within a fraction of a minute, even before they had paid him any tribute. The same general who was killed without a gun in his hand, without fellow soldiers around him fighting to defend him.
General Ivan, I think I was probably one of the first people to talk to him, and he had
The first thing he said to me, I always remember that very vividly. Both people didn't kill me again. So they had no idea what was going on.
The Guzang massacre is a crime only comparable to the Pinying massacre, the Ikata massacre, and the Munyenge massacre. These are crimes where it was formed in times of war and in times of peace.
These people who have died, Bia and the others, their blood goes on the head of all those who instrumentalize them to attack one another.
Accountability in this revolution is demanded, not only of those who collect donations and eventually embezzle them, but also and especially of those who have given themselves the powers to end the lives of others on ground zero. This is Brother Valentine Binglow reporting from Chicago for Ambazonia Calling.
We are returning to the theme of leadership, which was at the core of our editorial earlier today. And we've got Dr. Foster Dieter, who on his first assignment today for Ambazonia Calling says he weeps for Ambazonia just to see how lacking we are at the level of leadership.
We have steadily allowed emotions to creep into the way we advocate for this struggle. Our struggle was never about power, but about the plight of our people, held in bondage forever. Critically thinking, we are now focused on power and positioning over the suffering of our people. Leadership was meant to identify all restorationists, unify their vision, energy, and momentum in delivering a free Ambazonia. We are now focused on identifying people who will give us a free pass at the detriment of our suffering people. We are supposed to, at every point, ask whether our institutions are respected. Instead, we spend time forwarding biased arguments that fit our position and somehow hoping that will give us a free homeland. The idea of leadership was for us to have focused attention on the enemy, support the plight of our people, prepare for future self-governance. It was never about having a full government trying to govern in the air. The revolution was always about asking what gives us the best strategic advantage to shorten the suffering of our people, not about propaganda to destroy the short path in an attempt to consolidate power. Brothers and sisters, I have a big problem with how you, our leaders, are going about this revolution. We have lost focus because many of us have developed ill faith and selfishness in this struggle. We fabricate and confabulate data just so we paint a fellow fighter black. Each time there is a very invalid opinion, we rush to emotions and surrogate propaganda and emotional justification. I was blind, but now I understand why we could sell each other as slaves centuries ago, call each other come no go, sell Ambazonia to France, and today label fellow restoration fighters La Republic agents, just so our endorphins will please our selfishness and suffer the Ambazonia common citizen. Human rights and international organizations recognize the treasures within us. We do everything to relegate our treasures in favor of politics. We label our treasures all sorts of negative names so we can hang them. Is it just me? Or am I also going insane because I dare to be critical? I weep for Ambazonia. Foster Dita for Ambazonia Calling.
We don't do foolish, but when there are capital fools out there, we make it our duty to find them, and every week we crown one of them the Nyamfuka of the Week.
Veronique Vitimfe is here. She's got our rundown of the kings and queens of foolish.
In third position this week are the Amber Boys of Paul Atanganji. This week, a number of them were arrested in the Nchombu neighborhood of Bamenda, and they confessed that their job for a fee per month is to take hostages for ransom. Also coming in third place with them is Dr. Neba Fontan for the unfortunate role he played this week in adding to the confusion in the Ambazonia revolution, notably by decreeing the suspension of Comrade Sako Ekome from the SCLC without having the powers to do so. The fake Atanganji Ambas and Dr. Fontan are this week's third place finishers for the crown of shame, the Nyamfuka of the week.
Nyamfuka them all.
Finishing in the position of runners-up this week is Peter Mafani Mosonge and his so-called Bilingualism Commission. This week, the Dead on Arrival Commission chair said they recommend the banning of 2 words in the dictionary. If the God they have made Paul Biya into were to approve, the words Anglophones and Francophones would no longer be used in the Cameroons. For failing to realize that the people previously referred to as Anglophones, they have gone further. They have banned being called Cameroonians. For recommending the ban of words, Peter Mafani Mosonge is this week's second place finisher for the crown of shame, the Nyamfuka of the week.
Nyamfuka them all.
Finishing in the top position and running away with the crown is a beer fanatic by the name of Jean-Pierre Bilinga. During an interview last Friday night on television, Jean-Pierre Bilinga chastised Paul Biya for not slaughtering a bigger number of Ambazonians, saying someone diagnosed with cancer must be given chemo, not paracetamol. He said those being massacred are bandits and savages who kill colonial occupation forces. He described Ambazonians as foreigners. He claimed dialogue is impossible and off the table with people he said were in such factions that it is impossible to know who to engage. Jean-Pierre Bilinga is this week's winner of the crown of shame, the Nyamfuka of the week.
Nyamfuka them all.
This is Veronique Vitimfe for Ambazonia Calling.
Ambazonian women in the diaspora are organizing themselves better and mobilizing to ensure that they can take their rightful place in this revolution. But as Barrister Sia Jimvambe now reports, there has been this kind of momentum before. It just was wasted.
Ambazonian women in the diaspora have been galvanized into action. Action aimed at organizing themselves to play the key role women can and must play in the Ambazonia revolution. I've been pondering over what this newfound gusto for organization could be attributed to. Might it be the appearance, or should I say, the non-appearance of a certain unknown Lady Sally Likowo as a member of the SCLC formed during the All Southern Cameroons People's Conference in Washington, D.C.? Might it be the call from Berlin during the Ambazonia Stakeholders Strategic Conference to set up a confederation of Ambazonian women and the accompanying appointment of a coordinator without due consultation or input from the very women who are expected to benefit from such an institution? Or is it the outrage that a good number of women feel at being misled and or used by some machos in this revolution? Whatever the booster that has women kicking into higher gear, the point remains that there's talk. Lots of talk out there about revamping existing yet struggling women's groups, creating a worldwide Takumbang structure, and more. Great stuff, indeed. However, I'd be remiss not to caution based on experience from past efforts. Shortly after the August 2018 Unity Rally here in DC, a couple of women thought that it'd be a good idea and a good time for women in the diaspora to really start organizing, given the shenanigans that went on during and after that infamous weekend. Calls were made to a number of prominent women, some of the women who had already distinguished themselves as strong figures and strong voices across the globe. The intent was to bring everyone on board. The idea at that time was to have a worldwide Ambazonia Women's Conference on the same weekend. Issues of great importance to women would be tabled for debate at such a gathering. A chance would be given for women already doing great things to inspire and motivate others in an open house format. They would, it was hoped, recruit more women into the revolution and offer useful tips on how women can be actively involved while still meeting their other obligations. The event would help women articulate what they would like to see emphasized or dropped from the revolution. The gathering would also provide guidelines and a template for future conferences and guarantee visibility globally for women's issues in Ambazonia. The planning team was to comprise of representatives from all the continents. Would you like to know what became of all these great ideas? Well, newsflash. Shortly after the idea was floated and while still in the process of contacting potential planning team members, the usual sabotage and pushback took over. I remember hearing stuff like, "We don't need no damn conference. What organization are we even talking about? People are dying." Also heard, "Oh yeah, fantastic idea, but the IG is already working on something like that." Some of us were scandalized and frustrated by the negativity and rejection. It was clear that far too many of those women who have the limelight today feel threatened by any initiative that does not come from them. It was sabotage time indeed. The backstabbing started. The me, myself, and I mentality took over. Not any better than the men folk, I dare say. Now that women folk seem to have woken up from slumber and want another shot at organizing and judiciously working for the integration of women at all levels of this revolution, it makes sense to review how we got it wrong the first time. Some of the faults observed at that time and which are yet to evaporate, and this is by no means an exhaustive list, include fanatic group affiliation and one-party mentality, negative surrogacy and online lynching campaigns, self-aggrandizement and self-interest which got the better of those who can only see themselves as the center of the universe, intolerance, obsessive desire to always be in control or else, preventing the truth from prevailing while worshipping at the altar of falsehood. Over the past 2 years, the situation has, sadly, stayed the same or steadily gotten worse. It is therefore our hope and fervent prayer here at Ambazonia Calling that women will indeed finally rise above past impediments in favor of doing that which they must absolutely do. Put Ambazonia first. This is Sia Jimvo Ambe for Ambazonia Calling.
Freedom is coming. Freedom is coming. Freedom is coming. Oh yes, I know. Freedom is coming. Freedom is coming. Freedom is coming. Oh yes, I know. 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 Oh
What exactly happened to Dr. Fontan for him to end up suspending a member of the SCLC? That's the question Danny Jude Agua Ozugen has been asking himself. Here's his paper.
It would be unfair to consider the events of the past week without pondering for a little while what Dr. Fontan did. What exactly was Dr. Fontan thinking when he put pen to paper suspending Comrade Sako Ikome from the SCLC? Did Dr. Fontan, who is a classmate of Dr. Sako at the University of BOYO, think that this revolution was not different from rowdy students throwing pencils and math sets at each other in some classroom tantrum? Or is it the case, as some have said, they fear that Dr. Fontan has an agenda and is in this revolution for the lone purpose of rewriting not only a chapter in which he is a lead actor, but in reformatting the whole revolution? Questions, and more questions, no answers. In part because Dr. Fontan is a man of few words. He managed to keep silent from the moment he was released from the dungeons of La République to the convening of the ASCPC conference in Washington, D.C. last month. Dr. Fontan is no stranger to democracy and to the will of the people. His stint as a trade union operative in Nigeria and later on at the University of BOYO provided sufficient education, if any was still needed, that the strongman syndrome needs to be defeated. Might it be that Dr. Fontan left Jay, but Jay never left him, and he is still reveling in his thought despite being a free man? Is coordinating with those behind bars more important for him than cooperating and collaborating in the now and here with free men and women? Having been subjected to pain and deprivation in the dungeons of neighboring Cameroon, did the regime wire a time bomb into Dr. Fontan for him to be so off as to almost sound disconnected from the real world in which we lived? Which of the Dr. Fontans signed the letter suspending Comrade Sako from the SCLC? Might the Biya regime be holding Dr. Fontan's family hostages and exacting a pound of flesh from Ambazonia through him? Might that explain his reclusive disposition? You have to ask. For even at the conference where Dr. Fontan was supposed to be coming out of the closet, he seems to have run right back into the same seclusions once the conference was over in everyone's mind, but apparently not the mind of Dr. Fontan, who signed a statement as the convener of a conference long held. Dr. Fontan's decision to go solo on this speaks to the troubling aversion to collaboration and deliberation, which is the building block of SCLC. The coincidence in timing with a statement from the incarcerated leaders in jail is more than troubling. Did Sisiko demand that Dr. Fontan offer his blessings to the decision firing Comrade Sako? One thing is for sure. Ambazonians who have spent the past 2 years wondering where Dr. Fontan stands with respect to the restoration of our independence can only be more confused. It is hard to bear for those who are not involved to see that Dr. Fontan doesn't seem interested in disputing the portrayal of him as a parody. If anything, he seems almost eager to prove them right, and may have, just may have, comforted some of them in their doubt by his actions this week. This is Tanya Jude Agua Ozugen from Ambazonia Calling.
So get on now on the train. Everybody, get on now on the train. Mothers, fathers, get on now on the train. Children, get on now on the train. Sister, brothers, get on now on the train. Husbands, wives too, get on now on the train. Oh, Abba, Father, bless us. Oh, Jesus Christus, guide us. Oh, Holy Spirit, lead us on the restoration journey of our liberty. So, restoration train is our freedom train.
Barrister Manjong Jutambe says all what's happening at the helm of the IG group is a tussle for power, one that is not needed at a time when the revolution is in danger of going to the dogs. Here is Barrister Manjong Jutambe.
Bonafide Ambazonians must be scratching their heads after witnessing what transpired within the interim government group this week. I'm speaking of the duel between Siseko Ayuktabe in the dungeons of Colonial Yaoundé and Comrade Samuel Sarko, his acting successor. Whatever we may think and whatever positions and or opinions we may hold, their actions, coupled with Sarko's arbitrary sacking from the Southern Cameroon's Liberation Council by Dr. Niba Fontan, should and must give every well-meaning Ambazonian pause. For we are witnessing some of the undisputable signs of a dictatorship in the making. All peoples, it is said, deserve the governments they have. Therefore, search deep in your soul and you will realize just how much Ambazonians deserve the government they believe they have. The tussle for power while the campaign for recognition is on life support is pure madness. There's nothing about the revolution at the helm of the interim government group except the trappings of power. What did most Ambazonians do to stop this madness? The vast majority did not lift a finger. A tiny minority pointed to the traps that lay ahead at the time, but into which the revolution has since fallen prey. Those who dared to point this out were called all sorts of names: sellouts, unpatriotic, La République agents, and other more colorful names. Online surrogates and trolls went on the rampage, knocking down any who objected to their crowning of Ambazonia's first prince. Wise counsel no longer mattered. The taste of power had done its thing. What remained to be done was to consolidate power. That's how leaders of liberation movements were shot out of the Zaria conclave. That is how the one agenda item regarding government in Zaria consisted of the coronation of Siseko Ayuktabe and giving him all the powers he needed to make an Omar. Comrade Sarko took over from where Ayuktabe left off, and along with Chris Anu, audaciously banned other movements. The madness built up in the full view of Ambazonians who turned a blind eye and or acquiesced. Baby tyrants were begotten. If you follow the most cuckoo amongst us, Siseko Ayuktabe, they claim, can rule from jail. Those advocating this position thought they had found the perfect excuse. My trip to BOYO money was embezzled, they chanted, motivating Siseko Ayuktabe to blunder into the recent statement which might have ruined relations between him and the caretaker group. Without condoning Sarko's 419 tendencies, as evidenced by his handling of funds earmarked for the My Trip to BOYO phony scheme, one must wonder when Siseko Ayuktabe, who did not penalize mismanagement under Skepak, would blame Comrade Sarko. Is it not said that what is good for the goose is good for the gander? No be Sigwe they do coffee, na itu they do cocoa. The complacency of Ambazonians, or their criminal silence in the face and the birth and rapid growth of tyrants at the helm of this revolution, constitutes the manure feeding the crooked system we have in place today. We Ambazonians have taken this joke one level too far, and it is about time we put a stop to it, lest we do something even more sinister. As our people will say in Pidgin, now for inside play where dog the sleep with mommy. This is Manjang Jude Ambe for Ambazonia Calling.
Asia, inatia tiati. Kaviziendo te, inagini lingi. Hey, hey, oh. Hey, 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 oh, my hey.
In the wake of the confusion at the helm of the interim government group, Professor Carlson Anyangwe, himself an architect of that government, posted reflections on what he calls consistent inconsistencies. Here is Divayanje with that paper.
I am afraid the groundwork is being laid for a Jonas Savimbi and the South Sudan situation in Ambazonia, especially in the light of the action of a local Amba commander meddling in matters political, matters that pertain exclusively to the civil order. The reality is that the IG is yet to live up to expectation. There are accusations of an itching palm. There are accusations of leadership, conspicuous consumption lifestyle at the expense of the struggle. There are accusations of misconduct, contemptuous arrogance, and patronage management style. The leadership is very divisive. It is not inclusive and accommodating. It is very intolerant of criticism and alternative view. This holds no promise for democracy, free and safe political competition, robust civil society activism, and constitutionalism in an independent Ambazonia. The leadership has fractured Ambazonians in the diaspora and on ground zero, putting them on each other's throat. It has not conceived or rolled out struggle strategy and a vision for independent Ambazonia. All one sees is groping in the dark, loud, empty noises from left and right, a focus on money and power, and mere reactions to events that unfold. People do not help things by their distortion of facts and inconsistent inconsistency. Comrade Bo, for example, has for long attacked the IG on grounds that its head was not elected by the people, by universal suffrage through the internet. He vowed never to recognize the interim government. Now he finds it opportunistically convenient to pledge support. I doubt that the person who is the object of this evanescence support is fooled. Further, Comrade gives a self-serving narrative, an ex post facto rationalization of the standing of Mandela while in jail. Mandela became famous, but that is not who he was while in prison. He was an extremist, to use the language of the French Cameroon colonial oppressor and federalists, convicted and sentenced to life for treason. He was a felon. He was seen and listed in the West as a terrorist. The ANC tactically decided to make him the face of the South African anti-apartheid struggle to mobilize domestic and international public opinion in favor of his release. That is a common strategy now used by especially international human rights organizations to secure the release of any imprisoned prominent human rights activists. There is another false account by Bo Herbert in his write-up. Mandela did not become head of the ANC until after the death of Oliver Tambo in 1994. Throughout the time of Mandela's imprisonment, Oliver Tambo remained head of the ANC and conducted the affairs of the ANC from Norway, where he was in exile. Mandela was head of the South African Youth League. At the time of his arrest and imprisonment, he was the head of the ANC military wing known as the Umkhonto weSizwe. The claim that Mandela led his peers, Oliver Tambo, Thabo Mbeki, Desmond Tutu, Winnie Mandela, etc., be the leaders of the ANC, is utterly false and a piece of historical revisionism. Thabo Mbeki was in exile and in charge in the UK of ANC communication. His father, Govan Mbeki, was in prison like Mandela. Desmond Tutu was not in the ANC, but was, along with Pastor Alain Boissac, a leader in the Rainbow Movement that joined his voice in campaigning for Mandela's release from prison. Winnie Mandela was a combatant in her own right. All these South African freedom fighters did not need and did not have validation or authorization from Mandela, as Bo erroneously suggests. A final and important point to make is that throughout the struggle, The ANC never set up a government internally or in exile. BOYO's analogy in this regard is therefore illegitimate and invalid. It is often forgotten that the original idea of an Ambazonia interim government was not to ensure the governance of Ambazonia from abroad. That is infeasible. The idea was to create a directive instrument responsible for 1. Prosecuting the national liberation struggle, 2. Internationalizing and educating in regarding the quest for freedom, 3. Responding to the mounting humanitarian crisis, and 4. Crafting a vision for independent Ambazonia in all areas of national life. We may have erred in designating the instrument for action as a government. The answer to that mistake is to fix things. This necessarily involves serious critical introspection, recognition of the mistake, development and adoption of a realistic solution, and then crafting the way forward. This exercise requires the involvement of all willing and ready Ambazonians from the 4 corners of the earth. In this way, Ambazonians will take ownership of the way forward and run with it. There has since been a very detrimental deviation from the primary objectives of the struggle. The focus now is on power, government per se, appointments, offices, titles, money, conspicuous consumption. These expendable delusional quests are the root causes of the observed fracture in the Amazonia body politic, the bitter and acrimonious intra-Ambazonian fighting, including deadly fighting on ground zero, and the shameless peacock syndrome exhibited by some to the disgust and contempt of the informed outside world. There are all signs that portend an Angolan or South Sudan civil war situation in tomorrow's Ambazonia, raising well-founded fears among not a few people that this your Ambazonia thing is hardly worth the salt and that we might as well accept the status quo. The world is now conflict fatigued. It has no appetite for assuming the role of knight errant going about extinguishing the embers of conflict here and there. Accordingly, voices are beginning to say the UK was right, after all, in its conclusion that we do not deserve and merit sovereign statehood, and that we inexorably have to be under the tutelage of either of our adjacent neighbors. 60 years after the perceptive assessment, we have not been able to show cause why it should be changed. Of course, in the light of ground zero sacrifices, the assessment has now taken the form of a prescription for a federation in whatever form, shape, or size. I dare to suggest, against my own instincts and belief, that given this pathetic display of childishness and high degree of immaturity on our part, the federal thesis is apt to prevail on the long run if we do not change our nationally erring ways, recenter the struggle, and restructure the instrument of national liberation for better and timorous results. In the past 16 months, there has repeatedly been a chorus of rehearsed line about our imprisoned leadership trying to rule from prison. That line betrays the warped mindset of its propagators, who are persons consumed by and fixated with some amount of power, which on analysis is a mere figment of their imagination. The urgent call of the hour is the necessity of unflinchingly and successfully prosecuting the national liberation struggle. It is not ruling or governing. There is yet no state and no people over who we exercise imperium. Ambazonia remains a contested territory. We are not in control of it yet. The political leadership we proclaim is entirely located in the diaspora, bereft of any privilege, power, or ability to govern the land. There is nothing to exhibit as evidence of our governance of Ambazonia. A country and a people cannot be ruled or governed from abroad without a local presence on the ground. The colonial power ruled from the metropole, but we had an established administration in the colonial territory. This is Divine Angie, reporting in the studio for Dr. Carson Anyangwe.
This is Ambazonia Calling.
Given the importance of that paper by Professor Carson Anyangwe and a quick look at the time, we're coming up on an hour 30 minutes of programming already, so running too long already on the program. We will issue a response to that paper in lieu of the letter to Joshua when we come back.
This is Ambazonia Calling.
Because you have your army of occupation out in West Cameroon, you believe that when the people will rise, even if you took the whole of the French army and added to yours, you will never bring them down.
And I call on all Cameroon soldiers to lay down their arms within Ambazonia and to turn their arms against the very system that has made them slaves in the land of their birth.
For more stories from around the world, go to the World Wide Web at themissionstribune.com, compassfreepress.com, and africafreedomnetwork.com.
Here is our letter to Joshua.
I would like to thank Professor Carson Anyangwe for taking the time to put together such a rich paper on the history of South Africa, which I don't know half as much as you know. I mean, maybe not 1/100 as much as you know. So I'm glad that you shared the knowledge with me and with other Ambazonians. I hope that it was as educative for other Ambazonians as it was for me. That said, I would like to touch on a few points because you mentioned me by name in the paper. Number one is to explain the principle under which I am opposed to Seseko, Ayuk Tabe, or anyone else in jail trying to govern, trying to rule, trying to issue decrees. I'm first opposed to any kind of decree, and I believe that it is the instrument for dictators. But trying to rule or govern or direct a revolution from jail basically says, I'm more intelligent than everyone else who is out there. Number two, I know everything although I'm confined. I can work although I can be manipulated, I can be blackmailed, a gun can be held to my head. There's no reason why anybody sitting in jail should want to direct a revolution unless you think that you are indispensable. And we know that the cemetery is full of previously indispensable people. Number two is that I don't remember that Nelson Mandela issued decrees, and that's why I touched on Mandela's name specifically. I touched on it to say that I don't remember, although he played a big role in negotiating the final peace, that I don't think that he was sitting in jail trying to rule over any organization that he was heading. And it was not the ANC, as you point out in your paper. But I don't think that if he was running the Boys' Quarter Association of his neighborhood, he would still be governing it from jail. There's no reason to do that. So I'm opposed to that. Not because it is opportunistic. You said it was opportunistic for me to be supporting Sako. No. If Sako was in jail and Siseko was out and Sako wanted to rule from jail, I will be just as opposed to Sako as I am opposed today to Siseko governing from jail. I see that you are worried about an Ambazonian nation that will not be democratic, one in which warlordism might work. I mean, this is a worry you should have had a long time ago when you were thinking of the Skakuf Governing Council, when you were nominating people to become members of this government, when you were setting up the government basically by going around the corner of democracy that we could have used, which was on the table. I know you can laugh at internet elections, but internet elections is the future. The entire US election is online. That's part of the reason why the Russians were able to get into it. Estonia does all of its elections entirely online. All of your banking today is online, and it is more important to some people than even elections. It runs your entire life, your money, yet it is available online. That is the future of elections. There's no other way to go. Even a country like Nigeria is experimenting with online voting. And you live in South Africa. There are countries in South Africa, Namibia, one of them, in Southern Africa, Namibia being one of them, where elections are held online. So let's not make a mockery of what technology is going to bring to us. I know that some people are perhaps behind with respect to this technology, but we could create the legitimacy that we need for a government. And that's the other principle. I refuse to recognize a government that has not won elections, that does not have legitimacy from the people, that has not been hired by the people. In just the same way as I'm opposed to governments that rig elections to stay in power, like the Mr. Biya government. If I'm opposed to that government that rigs election, how much more for one that does not even bother to organize an election? And the third point I would like to raise is to remind you that you were sitting as the high priest in the Skakuf house, in the Zaria Mafia, when all of these things were happening, when people were being crowned king, emperor, and everything. That mafia was being set up by you. At one point, you were the one issuing the decrees and appointing the people. So you should have known then that what you were setting up was going to torpedo the democratic process that you are seeing now going down the drain. You should have known that it would torpedo the democratic process. You should have known, because that process excluded people who became bitter, who became opposed to that same system that you were putting up. So if the revolution has dragged along because people are opposed to each other with respect to this, it was due to some of the pampering, the encouragement that you, or the silence that you carefully observed at the time when you should have spoken up. I'm glad that you are speaking up now. I encourage you to continue to speak up. There are younger people speaking up on a daily basis, and the wisdom you carry is wisdom that should be spoken. It's not wisdom that you should keep to yourself and regret afterwards. So help us not end up in South Sudan. Help us build a democratic Ambazonia that is free of warlords, and one that we will be proud of because you worked for it, not because you schemed for it, or you schemed for some certain people to get certain positions at certain times because that was the more convenient thing to do. The convenient thing is not the right thing. So I think you should stick by the principles. The principles that create a democratic process don't begin with a dictatorial process. They don't begin by bypassing it, the democratic process. They stick with the democratic process no matter how difficult. Thank you very much again, Professor Anyanwu.
From our studios here in Washington, D.C., our producer is Jeff McCoy. Our music today is from Ken Wanaku, the monk from Balikumato, William Ford, an ambassador of blessed memory, Eric Matisse on the web at soundimage.org, and Prince Ajua Alemanji of Ajam Sonic Kitron, USA. Ambazonia Calling is a joint production of Africa Freedom Network, the Missions Tribune, and Compass Free Press. You can find us on the web at www.themissionstribune.com, www.compassfreepress.com, and www.africafreedomnetwork.com. Next Sunday is another day. Until then, keep the spirit, keep the faith, keep up the fight for justice and independence for Ambazonia. Stay Amba strong.